Okay, it's 5 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting to order, our work session between the airport committee and the city council. Would you mind taking the roll, please, Karen?
Sure. Councilmember Gray.
Here.
Councilmember Dietrich.
Here.
Councilmember Pointer. Here. Councilmember Schmidt.
Here.
Councilmember Sherburne.
Here.
Okay, before we get started, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. This is a work session for the city council and the airport committee, and there will be no formal action taken tonight. I want to thank those citizens who are in attendance, but please know that there will be no public comment here tonight at all. We ask that you take personal conversations outside because the meeting is being recorded, and we want the public to have the opportunity to hear all the same information we do. And we want to make sure there's no audio distortion. I think everyone here can agree that the airport has attracted more than its share of attention on over the last couple of years. I also believe if we were all given the chance, we would ask for a do-over in how many things have been handled, myself included. The worst thing that has come out of this is that it is creating a division in our community. Progressive communities come together and work together to find common ground. They don't look to find blame, create roadblocks, or dig in and not find compromise. There's no right or wrong side here. We all want what is best for our community and its citizens, well past our time here on earth. It also needs to be said that our council appreciates all of our different committees that we have. They act as another level of citizen participation, fiscal responsibility, and guidance to the city council on how we handle our amenities, zoning, and development. And they do it for free. And our council also has a right to have all the facts they need to make an informed decision. Now is the time for all of us to take the emotions out of the mix of this issue. We need to respectfully discuss the facts on both sides so everyone can make an informed decision on our next steps. What has happened in the past is now in the past. We are not going backwards. We're looking through a new windshield where I hope we can start to build trust while we discuss and understand the pros and cons of the city's airport. With that said, there's going to be some ground rules that we're going to use tonight so we have a productive work session. As you remember, I asked everyone to submit their questions and findings by July 1st. And again, prior to this meeting, so all council members would have an opportunity to read through. Do we have those tonight? Does anybody have anything to submit?
I do.
Okay, can you please submit those?
I can go ahead and make copies.
Yep, that'd be great.
And there's Lois here. She could probably do it.
Wait a minute.
Do the 16.
16, yeah.
That's it? Yeah, okay.
I've taken great pride in making sure that our council is never surprised by anything that comes before them. And so with that, because not everybody's had an opportunity to look at that, I'm going to put those all aside for now. The only comments and concerns that I did hear verbally were expressed on June 24th during that council meeting, and that related to the airport runway resurfacing project. And that was by Brian regarding closing the airport, and Linda on what we are going to do if FAA dollars dry up. As I told you at the committee as a whole meeting, I had invited Tom Chandler from the AOPA, which is the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, to explain to us what is involved with closing the airport and how FAA funding works and if there's potentials for those to dry up. So those are the only questions that I knew about that I could come prepared. Yes.
Can I correct you on that?
Yeah.
I never once ever stated that I want to close the airport.
Okay.
Never once have I ever stated that I want to close the airport. I want to get that on record,
Okay,
that I've never indicated. I said, if we can't make this airport viable and at least be self-sufficient, that maybe we need to sell it and move on with bigger projects like the city shop. That was what I stated. I did not state, I've never stated to close the airport. Never have I.
well, it came across a little differently that way, so I apologize.
I don't think so,
Okay.
but
All right. Everyone will have an opportunity to respectfully ask questions and answer questions tonight. So before we start, I want everybody to take a moment and look around the table. at everybody who's here and seated, and remember that we are neighbors, colleagues, and citizens of this great community. And that is bigger than any airport. So let's get to work. First thing I'm gonna do is, because we don't have all that other stuff, is I'm gonna go ahead and introduce Tom Chandler. And let you talk about him, because, yeah.
Yeah, well, Connie, thank you and council, thank you again for the opportunity to address your concerns regarding the Manchester Airport. We are here as your airport board to provide guidance and support to the council. In the past council meetings, you have expressed questions and concerns regarding the airport. We feel it's important that we ask Tom Chandler to join us today to help address those concerns. Tom is the regional manager for AOPA's Central Southwest region. Tom's organization worked closely with the FAA, the House and the Senate to write the current legislation that we have under the 2024 FAA reauthorization bill. That bill was signed into law on May 15th of 2024, so it's a very new bill. Tom is here today to address your questions and concerns regarding the operational commitments for the airport, the federal funding for the airport, and the potential closure of the airport. And so we felt that he would, with his involvement in the organization and the support of that bill and helping to draft it, that he would make a great representation to address your concerns. Tom, thank you for joining us today. Maybe you can give us a brief introduction and share with us maybe some of the things you're going to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening. Can everybody hear me pretty well?
Yes.
Good, good. And I am not sure what's up on the screen. I'm going to try and share mine. Let's see if it works and you guys get to see it. Should end up with a PowerPoint slide once it catches up. Let me know if you see it.
I'm not seeing any sharing yet.
Oh, here. One more button. How about
There it
that?
comes.
There.
All right, got a pretty airplane picture up there on the lake. All right, good. That way I can make sure I'm on the right slide for what I'm speaking to through this. But I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all and hope educate folks on airport funding and the issues that you're coming across, and try and just get everybody on the same page and knowledge base so you guys can move forward from there. So let me start out just a quick bit of background from me. Make sure the slides can advance here. All right. So AOPA, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. So we're the largest aviation advocacy organization in the world. So we've got 300,000 members, primarily in the US, 2,500 members in the state of Iowa. And a big piece of our business is federal and state legislative work, airport issues just like this, what we're discussing tonight. And we do a lot of legal and medical support for pilots, and also safety training. And we have a great foundation that does some great work at the high school level, which would be another thing I'd be interested in talking to you folks down the road about. But tonight we'll focus on the funding. So our organization is based near Washington, D.C. We're outside in Frederick, Maryland, because of all of our work is focused at the federal level. I'm one of the few staff that's out in the field that cover the various states across the country here. Whoops, I think may jump to there. How about that one? So I give you a little feel for my region. I actually grew up in central Kansas near Wichita, and grew up flying, and went into professional flying for about 15 years, flying air ambulances out of Wichita, and then made a little career path change, got into airport management. Managed a small airport, not unlike Manchester. I was in McPherson, Kansas, right in the center of Kansas, town of about 15,000 people. So I've faced a lot of the different challenges you all are, and all the questions are very common for any small town. And so I totally understand what we're talking about today. And as part of my work there, I also got involved at the Kansas Association of Airports, the state airport managers group, and was even president of that association for a little while. And that's really how I got into the advocacy work that led me to my current job at AOPA, which I've been doing for coming up on 8 years now. Since moved into the Dallas area. I'm out in a small town, kind of a suburb of Dallas on the east side. So that's where I'm coming to you from tonight. Part of our job as regional managers, as you can see, I oversee 9 states. The Central and Southwest label comes from the fact that I cover the FAA regions, the Central region, and a separate region known as the Southwest region. The Central region is Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, and Missouri, and that office for the FAA is based out of Kansas City. So I do a lot of work with them and working through issues just like this. Give you an idea there. So we will be talking a lot about the FAA, and the Central region, like I said, oversees your particular airport. And I've been working with that staff closely for almost 20 years now between my different roles within the association. But my primary job is state legislative work in all 9 of my states. So work on bills at the Capitol. I'm in Des Moines on a regular basis. Work airport issues such as this. And then we also have a network of airport support volunteers among our members spread across the country. And so I manage our volunteers in my region. So to get started with the issue at hand, first, like I said, this is not an unusual issue to run up against. I've run up against communities like yours trying to figure out what to do with their airports. So you all have a lot of different budget challenges and things you have to look at as city leaders. And we understand that. And the real challenge of this becomes the fact that operating airports and funding airports is quite different from most any other city department that you all run on a daily basis. And so that's why I end up being brought in to kind of explain some of these sorts of things and how it works for funding. So to keep your airport operating safely and doing the most it can for your community. And of course, most of these discussions with closure concerns start from a basis of concerns about taxes. So it's probably safe to say, I think probably everybody in the room is concerned about their taxes and how those are spent at all levels, at the federal level, local level, state level, what have you. So let's talk a little bit about how those funds work when it comes to airports. The airport projects such as you all have undertaken over the years to support your airport are funded out of the Airport and Airway Trust Fund, which is an FAA fund. As you can see, it started in 1970. The revenues feeding that are derived from almost strictly aviation-related excise taxes that are passenger ticket taxes, taxes on cargo, taxes on fuel. So every bit of fuel that's sold at your airport there's a chunk that goes into supporting this system, as well as all the airports across the country. Only a small portion of the FAA is funded via any general fund dollars going into that. So it's largely self-supporting. And those are the funds that go into the airport and airway systems and keep our aviation system going to benefit everybody in the country. And so next we'll talk about, well, first I want to apologize. Some of these slides get rather wordy, and I always hate that about, it's like a cardinal sin of PowerPoint presentations, but it's hard to avoid when we're talking about FAA policy. So I'll try not to read them word for word, and I've tried to highlight the important parts and minimize that as much as I can. So apologize for that ahead of time. So the FAA reauthorization bill, as I mentioned earlier, is a 5-year authorization. So this rolls around typically on a 5-year rotating schedule for the FAA, and it is to authorize and fund all aspects of the FAA. Of course, tonight we'll be mainly talking about airport funding specifically. This was just passed in May with strong bipartisan support. As you can see, I put up the vote numbers there just because I think everybody can agree it's pretty rare that our Congress comes together at numbers like that to support much of anything. And so this was a unique bill. It took over a year of work amongst Congress, and our staff in DC were deeply involved in that process. So we have an intimate knowledge of that. And it was interesting that every member from Iowa voted in favor of this bill. So coming out of that was the first increase in 20 years to the Airport Improvement Program. So that's the program that actually drives the funding for all of these projects. They raised it. We've been sitting at $3.35 billion for over 20 years, and that bumped up to $4 billion annually. So a 20% increase. So as you can imagine, over a 20-year period, that didn't even keep up with inflation, but we're happy to have it after 20 years of no change. So nobody's really complaining on that. Happy to be able to get back out and improve our airports at a better level. But one section, the one that applies really tonight for some of the discussion that's been going on, there was a specific section in this bill, and this bill is hundreds of pages long. This item, 719, to protect general aviation airports from closure specifically. And says the section ensures that the FAA will only permit grant obligated airports to close if the closure will not result in a permanent closure of an airport unless the secretary determines that the waiver will directly facilitate the construction of a replacement airport. And my understanding, that is not what's being proposed at your airport. You did have a community up in Northwest Iowa that did just such a thing a few years back, so it does happen. But this flat out says that for grant obligated airports, they're not going to allow them to close. So the next question is, how does that apply to Manchester? So this slide is shows the various grants that have been taken on. This is from the FAA's website for Manchester. It looks back 5 years. You guys actually go back further, but the time frame matters. The most recent ones hold a little more weight, and we'll get into that in a moment. And so you can see the last bigger ones were in 2021 and 2019. And so yes, these all these grant assurances and everything we're discussing definitely apply to your airport. So as part of that, the grant assurances are something we're going to talk about quite a bit, which is an agreement that's signed with every single one of these grants. There's a lot of boilerplate language, and that's what we'll be going over. These are very typical. They're in the same grants for whether it's Chicago O'Hare or it's Manchester. That same language is in there and give the same protections for these federal monies that are being spent. So I think we can all agree, one thing we don't want are projects being built with federal money and then, abandoned or left to and not maintained and able to enjoy the full value of it over the lifespan of a project. So that would be a huge waste. And so that's what a lot of these grant assurances speak to, in addition to how airports will operate in a variety of manners and how it's protected for the airport, just on a variety of points. But we're going to stick with the grant assurances that apply to this closure question tonight. As you can see, he'll set the it being the term they use is an airport sponsor, is basically how Manchester is considered in FAA language. You are the airport sponsor as the city. So the airport sponsor will not sell, lease, or encumber, or otherwise transfer, dispose of any part of the property on Exhibit A of this application. Exhibit A is basically an airport layout plan. You guys should have it in your file somewhere. It's really everything on the airport. And for the duration and terms, conditions, and assurances without approval of the Secretary of Transportation. So, so the next question always becomes, okay, well, let's talk about terms and conditions and duration. Duration and applicability. So the terms, conditions, assurances of this grant agreement will remain in full force and effect through the useful life of the facilities developed, but in any event not to exceed 20 years from the date of the grant offer for the federal funds. And so the reason the timing was important for each of those projects is because each one starts basically a 20-year clock for those dollars that were funded through those projects. And make sure I'm not missing anything as I roll down here. So interestingly, though, there were a couple different projects. So your 2019 project, I believe, was a runway resurfacing, did some work to the runway to help prolong the viability of that pavement. And so I think you guys are also looking now at maybe a more in-depth reconstruction type project coming forward is what I'd heard. So that was 2019, and that would the 20-year item would apply. I highlight down here in green another one that says and relates to real property acquired with the federal funds. So the 2021 grant that was taken was actually for purchasing some property as part of the airport. So this item applies for that particular grant. And that says that with respect to those particular grants, there will be no limit on the duration, terms, and conditions. So this is a perpetual requirement for that particular chunk of land. And so So obviously that's a big tie, but the FAA doesn't want to be buying lands for communities, basically, just to lose them when the winds of change happen within a community. So they maintain
Can I ask-
control of that. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask a quick question? So back to the slide before, you said something about, so. Cause I don't want to misquote Brian. He said sell or close. So we can't sell either. Is that what you're
No.
saying?
No, you cannot. There is a provision where if somebody were want to buy the airport, there is ability to privatize an airport, but it still has to be operated as an airport. You'd have to convince somebody to come in and buy it and operate it as an airport and take on all of these grant assurances as part of that.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. All right. So hit that. So a lot of airports, when they're trying to figure out if they're in crunches, the next question is, well, if we just ignore the airport and let it waste away, well, of course, the FAA, they're onto that particular option as well. And as part of Grant Assurance 8 is the assurance that your community is given that they will maintain the pavements and other projects to maximize the useful life of those particular items that were funded. So you've got to continue to maintain the airport and keep it safe and available to the public, and so it can continue to get the maximum value for your entire community. All right, so let's talk about the closure process. Let's say if, and I put a big if in red, the only way to potentially go down the closure path would be if the FAA reauthorization, when it comes back around in 5 years in 2029, if they pulled that particular phrase out, which I think is highly unlikely. But if that happened, then you would be looking at the earliest potential closure of the airport would be 2039. So that is that 2019 grant carried out for the 20-year period. And that doesn't even count the perpetual grant on the land acquisition. So that'd be a whole nother question because obviously it goes on forever. So decided at that point, you still wanted to go down the path and start trying to get the FAA to close the airport. You'd submit a request with the FAA. There's I actually have some information I could give you and point you. There's a pretty designated process. But the interesting thing is, so the FAA will respond. And so I put together, we went through this process with Midland, Texas, started down this path a couple of years ago to close their smaller general aviation airport that's in close to town. They have another international airport as part of the community. So their intent was to close down the smaller airport and basically move it out to all those facilities out to the larger one. So I'll use them as an example, mainly because they went far enough. A lot of communities don't even get that far, but they went down that path. And so this is the response that they got back from the FAA. It was actually a 29 item list of requirements if they wanted to continue to pursue closure of the airport, and requirements that the FAA needed them to meet. Number 5 is probably one of the biggest, that you actually have to justify how closing the airport is going to benefit civil aviation. That's a tough question to answer. I don't know how you make the judgment that closing an airport is going to benefit civil aviation. And one of the keys to that is highlighted there, that the non-aviation interest of the sponsor, that's the airport, the community or the local community, such as making land available for economic development, does not constitute an airport benefit that can be considered in justifying a release and disposal of the land. So selling the economic development side of it, which is what Midland had in mind because of the location of the airport, that's not reason enough to close the airport. So that didn't fly. Then they want to know about, well, if they did close it, what would the disposition of the properties be? For the active tenants, what would be the plan to relocate those aircraft and other operations that are on the airport? And of course, there's a public comment period. It's all very out in the open and has to be justified fully throughout the community and understood. And then the last one there is the what revenues are expected as a part of the closure, and describe a plan for the timeline and the use of the revenues or proceeds. And one of the key items there that I highlighted is that federal law requires that all funds generated by the airport or on the airport have to remain in the aviation system. So that even if you guys were able to go through this whole lengthy, probably decades-long project, the funds from the property would have to go back in the aviation system most likely is placed into the state coffers, into the state aviation system, or potentially donated to a particular airport for a particular project. So those monies do not flow back to the sponsor. The item there. And the other key is that no airport's really gone down to this full closure process. I'll go back there. It's always associated, such as I mentioned, with the communities. They're up in the northwest corner of Iowa. The name escapes me. There were 2 communities with separate airports. They were able to close those at 2 airports, and the communities joined together and made a new airport. That sort of thing they'll allow closures on. But just to close it, the FAA does not allow that. It just doesn't happen. And the amount of legal hassles that you'd have to go through would be lengthy. There'd be tremendous costs in doing that. You'd literally be fighting a battle with the federal government. So that's a challenge. So that kind of outlines what I know, the process and the hurdles that you'd likely encounter. Obviously, as an aviation guy, I hope that you will choose quite the opposite path and choose to support the airport. And so I wanted to end this more on a positive message as well, and relate some of my experiences with other communities. And I had another closure threat. It was actually ongoing before I hired on in Cuero, Texas, a very similar community, about 8,000 people, rural Texas. They'd pedaled through this whole path for over a decade and came down to the very last city council meeting to sign on the dotted line to close the airport. Of course, by then the entire city council had turned over the period of time they'd been doing this. Basically looked at themselves and asked if they really wanted to do it. And they decided not to. They kept the airport open, and not only that, they just finished closing on over 100 acres of property, and they will be building a new airport for their community. So really a total change of heart. And so, through the process, you start to understand what you're giving up potentially with this sort of thing. And I encourage you to realize that the airport's an economic engine, and it provides a lot of benefits for the community. And I mentioned in my introduction that I spent about a decade flying air ambulances into small communities just like yours. In fact, we even operated into Southwest Iowa on occasion out of Kansas to pick up patients from communities just like yours. And that is a huge issue. And I was told, just kind of in prep for this, that you guys have a significant regional medical center there. And one of the requirements for different levels of certification for hospitals as they try and build business and start doing more interesting things and be able to serve their communities in a better way is there's a certain requirement for air ambulance capabilities. And I know you guys have helicopter service, probably from a couple of different community cities nearby. One of the interesting things that people don't realize is that helicopters are very limited by weather, especially winter weather. And you guys get plenty of that up there. They cannot fly in icing conditions. They don't fly in very low, what we call instrument conditions, when the visibility is low and the clouds are low altitudes. And so what happens when you need to transfer a patient? They bring in an airplane just like the one in the picture there, which is exactly the kind I flew doing that job. And so we roll in. Usually communities don't even know you came and went because you're just another airplane out there. They notice the helicopter at the hospital, but they don't notice the airplane come and go out there, often in bad weather in the middle of the night. But that happens. And I'd be interested to know from your hospital folks how often it happens. It'd certainly be a consideration for you as you look into all this. But a key benefit for any rural community is medical access. Another thing I always want to point out on business flying, everybody hears about business jets and the high roll and stuff and that kind of thing. But the truth is over 60% of the business aircraft fleet are propeller driven aircraft like what I shown there. And all of that 60% aircraft pretty much can operate in and out of Manchester. So significant piece of the business. Don't discount it just because you have a smaller runway and can't attract as much of the jet traffic. You guys can accommodate some light jets, but you can certainly accommodate all the propeller driven traffic. So know that. And then of course, the big dog, honestly, in your neighborhood is the ag spraying. And I'm told that you have a significant agricultural spraying operation that is set up shop there some. I think about 5 airplanes is what I was told, in and out. They tend to migrate around a little bit with the business, but That is a huge economic impact to your community and be able to serve your farming community. I assume ag is probably the biggest industry in your area. And you know, it's critical for the airports to be able to support all of those. And so I encourage you to consider that as you work through these deliberations. And so, you know, I always kind of work backwards through all this too, is, you know, can your farmers get by without ag sprayers being located like that nearby? Sure, they can do ground rigs, or they can have aircraft brought in from nearby airports, but they still don't get the same service. But can your city deal with business, you know, potential being knocked out the door by aircraft or businesses that operate aircraft not coming to your community and choosing other communities over yours? That's a bigger hit, and or different hit anyway. But certainly the biggest one is, can your, you know, injured or sick family member survive the ground pounding trip to one of the nearby cities rather than flying them out when the weather's bad? And that's a maybe. They may or may not be able to handle that. So these are things you guys need to consider. I mean, your airport's an important part of your community. And so I urge you to not see it too narrowly, and to figure out ways that you can actually support it and grow it. We all understand that there's challenges financially with operating airports, and especially small communities, there's tough decisions to be made. But your airport's gonna be around a while, and I encourage you to support it. And so again, thanks for the time. Let me scroll over to questions, and there's my contact information if everybody wants to contact me directly. But in the meantime, if there's questions right now, I'm happy to stand for this.
Hi, Tom. Jim Fisher here. We spoke in the past. Could you expand a little bit on I see you have a slide on the back about the 95-5 match versus the 90-10.
Sure.
Can you expand on that a little bit for everyone to know?
Sure. Yeah, I had put together a couple other slides. Let me get past that one. So this was also a change in the FAA reauthorization bill that was just passed, because local share for airports. So there's a temporary thing. It's only for fiscal year 2025 and 2026. That normally these programs have a 10% local cost share, which is what you've probably done in your past grants. But during these 2 years, they're going to drop that down to 5%. So they're basically cutting the local share in half. And so consider everything on sale in that respect, to try and get these projects done. And so this was a tremendous thing for airports, especially, you know, the smaller communities are the ones just like yours that struggle to find those dollars. You guys are making tough choices. We get it. But that sure makes it a whole lot easier. And from what I understand, you guys have already started down some path, at least with some planning for some of these projects. And that puts you in a tremendous position to be able to take advantage of some of this over the next couple of years. So I would encourage you to do so. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. The ending after fiscal year 26, what happens then? It's back up for reauthorization? Or?
Well, it should go back to we assume it's going to go back to 10% unless they take some other action to extend that to the 5% for a longer period of time. That's always an option for Congress. But right now, all we can expect right now is for it to go back to 10% until 2029, in which case they'll revisit at that point when the next FAA reauthorization comes around.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm just reviewing some of the questions. Do you care if I ask one of your questions? Okay. So I know that the number of planes fluctuates in our hangars. How does that affect, you know, can he answer that as far as the funding and stuff that we receive? Because sometimes we have 10, sometimes we don't. I mean, things change from year to year. And people move, people come back, people die, you know, it's just that kind of thing. So how does that work? Because I know we're in the NIPIAS right now. So how does that affect us as we go through things?
All right, good. You've got a little background in it if you're using terms like NIPIAS, so that's good. So yeah, that is one of the requirements within the NIPIAS for funding to remain in the NIPIAS is there's a 10 aircraft limit, which you've obviously heard about. that you don't want to drop below if you don't have to. It's not something they watch closely to where you drop 1 or 2 below and you automatically are going to lose funding for your next project. But I certainly encourage you to work to try and get back above that number if you're below it. And it's one of those things. They have discretion on some of that, especially if they see an airport that's making improvements. If you're starting to look at building some hangars and that kind of thing, which will obviously, if you can get some more based aircraft, there's tons of hangar demand. It's one of our biggest problems in general aviation is there's way more demand for hangars in most areas than there are hangars available. So, if you get a hangar project off, it wouldn't even take a big one. And obviously you'd quickly bump up across that line and you would steadily stay above the 10 aircraft number in that case.
Yeah. And I would add to that too. We actually have a wait list of people that want to be here. So we have, I'm not sure if it is 9 or 10 right now, but as he said, the measurement of that is not absolute. And, because people damage airplanes, sell airplanes from time to time. However, they understand that process ebbs and flows. And so they want to see growth there and intention to support it. And we have a wait list of people that want to be here. So, I don't think we'd have any problem achieving that number.
And in my conversations with State of Iowa DOT and the federal FAA, their comment is do what you can to grow the numbers, build hangars, do things. If private people want to build hangars, encourage that. We'll get above the 10 number. It won't be an issue. But for right now, it's not going to stop us, right? Just because we're at 9. Is that correct, Tom?
Absolutely
It's not
correct.
hard.
Yeah, and another thing that changed recently that may help you, especially with the sprayer operations, since they're kind of mobile. It used to be that an airplane could only be counted at one airport. And so airplanes that moved around like that, or seasonal ones, we have snowbirds that go into different parts of the country, that kind of thing. That airports end up fighting over these aircraft numbers. But they just recently now allow the airports to basically share them 50-50, so that if you've got some airplanes that maybe are, especially the sprayers, I could see sort of based at another airport, but spend a good chunk of the year at yours, you could potentially be able to count those as well.
Yeah, the operator that's here has 30 aircraft, 30 air tractors, and 5 are based here. He has one that is not on our list currently, but he tells us that it's being located here. So I don't think we have an issue that this is a regional maintenance facility for him, and he does store his 5 aircraft here during the off season. So,
Tom, Jim, again, there was a question brought up by one of the council members recently about what happens if the federal funds dry up. How can you
It doesn't
comment?
sound like snow too.
No.
Yeah.
Their tax is never gonna dry up.
I mean, I think
What
the
do you
best,
think?
sorry, I think the
Yeah.
best thing is that 5-year authorization. I mean, that automatically puts them out 5 years. That's what the FAA is doing. The program's been going since 1970. It's a huge part of the equation within the FAA industry. And one interesting point is, so that increase we saw from 3.35 billion to 4 billion a year for airport projects such as these, over 2/3 of that was specifically slated for general aviation airports. So it's not going to be the big airports getting the bulk of that adjustment. It's actually going to be the smaller GA airports. So that shows the commitment, I think, and the understanding among the congressional folks that small airports are important. I mean, that's that's the congressmen in areas like Iowa out there fighting for the smaller communities, just like yours. So it's paying off in those spots. But yeah, I don't see any real challenge to the FAA. It's a critical piece of the entire infrastructure in the nation, and that's not lost on the folks in DC.
And so if the federal government has entered into a binding 20-year agreement with all of these communities, they are on the hook as well to continue funding expansion projects or maintenance projects as well.
Yeah.
Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, of course, those contracts are always written in the federal government's advantage over the other folks. But I think if they really felt the need to get out of something, they could probably do it. But That's just not the trend where it's going. I mean, that's the funding's there. They're increasing the funding. The commitment is there. That has not been the issue of trying to convince them to continue funding these airports.
So I have a question regarding the actual thing that we're submitting for this.
Capital improvement plan.
So we were figuring it on a 90-10, so it could even potentially be less.
It could, yeah, when they put that together, they weren't sure to build it past that.
Right.
And the one thing I want to kind of put back on the table on that too, Tom mentioned in the presentation that we have an obligation to continue to maintain our airport. And as we know, we've talked about this in previous meetings, we had done slurry seals on our airport twice over the previous 10 years, and they kind of qualified those as about a 5-year lifespan. And we're at that 5-year point now, which is why you're seeing a lot of the surface kind of beginning to degrade and the cracks and stuff. So when the original expansion project, the original $9 million project, which we are not doing, when that was turned down, we came back, again, the board came back and said, we have an obligation to continue to support the field. So we need to look at a way to protect what's here because it is starting to fail. And so we asked for a quotation for a crack seal, which was basically a short-term solution, but it kind of keeps that moisture from getting into the cracks and continuing to freeze and break that apart. And that estimate came in at $63,000, which would basically give us a short-term solution to seal those cracks and kind of keep that decay from occurring for maybe 3 years. And 3, because the snowplows have a tendency to kind of peel that off over time. And so we kind of went back and looked for other alternatives. What else could we do? And that's where the $1.2 million budgetary proposal. And again, that's an estimate, right? Just like East Main Street, 400,000 was an estimate and came in at 180. This is an estimate. That was a resurface project for a 2-inch removal and replacement of the asphalt. And of course, it would require a repainting of the markings. It would install tile on both sides of the runway to deal with an issue that we talked about when we did the airport tour, where the water's kind of boiling out of the ground from the old farm tile that are there. Those items came in and could be used with a $320,000 BIL grant. And the balance of that would be 90-10 or maybe even 95-5. And that looked like, at that time, 85,000. It may be 60,000 now. And so we saw an opportunity, from a cost benefit perspective, that we could literally seal this runway for 20 years, 15 to 20 years, and spend what amounts to maybe $3,000 or $4,000 annualized over that 20-year lifespan for less than a 3-year crack seal. When you realize that we have to do that every 3 years if we do the crack seal. So we felt that this was a tremendous bargain, a great investment in supporting the runway, and it represented a substantial consolidation or pullback from the original 9 million. So it was a consolation, but we thought, took care of the landowner concerns, took care of the cost concerns, and really did a good job to put something in place for the city for the next 15 to 20 years. And that request was really a budgetary request. We're just asking to submit it for budget approval.
I have a question about the budget approval timeline. So if we submit the request now, Tim, this is for fiscal year 25, right?
Federal fiscal year 25.
Which we've only got 25 and 26 currently to take advantage of the 95.5. Am I correct in assuming a $1.2 million project would cost the city 5% or 60,000? Is that what we're looking at? Am I doing the math right?
I'm not gonna do the math off.
Don't answer that today,
Okay.
but that would be
Yeah.
the thing that
True.
it's about what we budgeted for the band shell
Right.
repainting.
Yeah, that too. But for the 60,000, we could be done for 20 years roughly versus do another crack seal and it'll be busted up like it is now in 3 or 4 or 5 years. That seems kind of like a no-brainer, but we have a time window to make that happen.
Or we lose the grant.
Or we lose the fiscal year 25 and 26. Is that an accurate?
Again, with the federal, what we have to do is get this submitted so they can get it planned in their budget as they're going through their budget process. So this will be their 25 budget process.
Okay,
I'm not sure when they will authorize it.
right,
Typically, what they've done is we submitted the stuff, like we've done in 2019, 2021. We submitted in June, May or June, got it on their books. That, and they issued the grant in September, no, excuse me, January. And then we go out for, planning with the
Formal
engineer
bid.
and going out for bids on that.
so,
And then trying to figure out time for the person to get in there. It very well could be, it wouldn't be until our fiscal year 26, but because our fiscal year ends June 30th, starts July 1, federal is September 30th and October.
September 30th.
And am I correct? I mean, the council still has the authority to make a final decision on that at that time.
The council has to authorize me to sign the grant agreement with the FAA.
But they still have another opportunity to decide yes or no
That's
on that project.
exactly right, because if you don't authorize me to sign it, we don't move forward.
Right.
So are there any other options on the table? We've got an option now to spend, to put a request in, not authorize it, but to put a request in to possibly be done with this thing for the next 20 years, which is very efficient. We missed that window. I think that would be very responsible of us. And if we're looking at 25 and 26 to hit this 95.5 gift, I think we need to kind of move ahead on that
Well,
at some point.
I agree the numbers look good. But as I explained to you and told you out at, when we met on the runway, when I inspected the hangars, the perception is that the city split the bill in the 65 or 85,000. They're footing the bill for the runway that you guys get to utilize, 10 people and some flights that come in and out from other aircraft, but the majority of the flights are you guys. So you guys are basically getting to use the runway for free, other than their hangar lease.
You're making the assumption that we're the only people in
Okay,
town.
Well,
Be
yeah,
nice.
I understand that.
No,
I understand there's more flights
There's a lot
and
more.
there's
we
more
know.
things, but the perception of the taxpayers are that we're footing your bill so that you can fly your planes on our runway with no, there is no revenue coming in off that runway for the use.
Okay, I have a question for Tom Chandler.
Mhm.
How do you refute that argument that an airport does not have enough revenue to justify its existence? Do you get that from other communities, Tom?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, you all, like I said, it's a common theme at a lot of airports. And the key is looking at the airport. The analogy I always use is it's an off ramp. It's no different. I looked at your community. It looks like you've got two off ramps off of Highway 20. This is very similar. I mean, it's, you don't ask for your people coming off your off ramps to pay individually. It's to be able to bring business and people into your community to access a different part of the transportation system is all it is. And the key is these other uses, high value things to the community, such as the business and the medical and the ag, and there's just tons of them. There's, if you guys have a natural disaster, I guarantee if half the community gets hit by a tornado, that airport is gonna be critical to getting things back up and running in your community. There's so many pieces to the equation. And so just saying the dollar for dollar issue is just not the right way to look at it holistically. You got to look at the big picture on this.
I look at it this way, and if you do the math or whatever, like you said, the numbers look good, but we as a city do everything we can to encourage economic development, to have businesses come in town. I mean, we want our city to grow. I mean, we don't want it to be below 5,000. I would like to see it to be around 7,500, be comfortable for me. Well, but never say never.
Can.
It could, but the thing is there isn't one business here in town that we don't have access to their business here in town, a street. And this is just another access road to business. I mean, when they came in here and told us the original person, Ollie Henderson, was the one who came in, back in 1959, 60, whatever, it's older than me. Is the one who kind of said, hey, we need to do this, and people have gotten behind it. Previous councils have gotten behind it. I mean, they had a vision for something that goes way beyond us existing here. And if we close down that avenue of business to have more people come in here and other industry come in here, which brings in people, which brings in housing, which brings in other amenities. We're the circle of life here.
And I don't argue any of those
Okay,
points,
okay.
but to coin your phrase
Mhm,
for the East Street main that I'm gonna have to pay to replace my concrete
mhm,
and my driveways and sidewalks
mhm,
at my bill,
mhm.
even though I'm a taxpayer, I'm gonna have to I watched them rip my concrete out and I gotta pay that bill over 10 grand.
Mhm.
You coined the phrase, skin in the game. Well, I throw it back to you guys.
Okay.
Why can't we have skin in the game?
Okay,
You
let
know,
me answer that. We did some math earlier on the annual cost of running the airport, maintenance, snowplow, mowing the grass, et cetera. It averages around 30,000, something like that. That dollar amount to the average, what the effect of someone's property tax. If we were to dump the airport, a major economic engine for this city, that would represent a reduction in property taxes of 0.3%, about a third of 1% is what everybody would feel.
I fully
Do you think
understand
that's a good return?
No, and please, I don't mean to be insulting.
No, I'm not saying.
Stop saying that I want to close the airport, because I've
No.
never said that.
No, you
Right.
said sell, and I
I
took it as,
sell.
I took it as that, that's
So
why I
I
asked.
just want everybody, I just want to clear the record that I've never advocated to close it. What I'm stating is perception is everything. I keep saying that, perception is everything. The people, the taxpayers, I really think they feel that if they're going to put some skin in the game, that others should put skin in the game.
Brian, one of the things you make a valid point, right? There is a cost to it,
Yeah.
right? Just like the library or the pool or anything else.
Can we stop comparing
Well,
other entities? to
Yeah,
the
you can't,
airport?
you can't compare
The
that.
band shell to the airport, the band shell's got historical value, the airport does not, the library is not anything like the airport, they're not, it's apples and oranges.
It is, and it just goes back to, trying to sell that, like I said that day out there, I pay thousands of dollars to go deer hunt for a week. That's my hobby, and it's an expensive hobby, and I choose to do that in a hobby. What I'm saying is, if we do this and take advantage of the money, which I think we ought to, I just think there ought to be some, let's face it, sun and weather are gonna deteriorate that, but the landings and takeoffs cause deterioration of that too.
I don't know
So why are we?
I don't know that.
Okay, so
I
do
don't-
you guys pay taxes on your,
Yes.
on your stuff?
Yeah, our buildings were built with private funding. A lot of the airports that you go to, the buildings are built with federal money. My costs on my hangar was north of 100,000 20 years ago. So you can do a time value of money calculation on that. It's probably 400,000 today. But that aircraft for me was my tractor. It was the tool I used to make a living and go to Chicago and Minneapolis and bring that money back to this community and invest it. I bought signs from you, Brian, you know that.
I know.
So the point is that economic engine pays dividends to everybody. And I do want to answer your question about the cost. The 10 based aircraft, there's some perception that those 10 aircraft are the sole benefactors of that airport. There's another way to look at that, and that is that those 10 aircraft are enabling you to have 95.5 funding on this airport. Before 2005, when I built my hangar in 2005, Manchester paid it all.
You paid it all, yes.
100%. And they thought it was a great deal back then to do that. And we actually, as an airport board, 15 years ago said, guys, there's federal funding. We should ask to be part of that. And we knew that we had to go through an ALP or an airport layout plan, which took us 10 years to do. And that process kind of laid out what a growth process would look like for funding, for hangars, which will get us to an economic equilibrium. We can get there. But it takes the growth to do that, and we have to have confidence in our community, in the pilots that want to put planes there, that they're not gonna get shut down, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful fashion, but it is, you know, it is something that takes away investment confidence, and so the 10 that are there have made it possible for you guys to have a 95% reimbursement, so you're literally a 950% return on that investment. Where else can you spend $1 and get that kind of return?
But you know, on the same token, I hear all that, but then I take myself back as a taxpayer and a citizen that absolutely has nothing to do, which is about 90, you know, a lot in this town that absolutely have nothing to do with the airport. And how do you convince those people that it's worth spending the money?
It's a valid point.
You know,
But,
it just.
but I mean, and Joe, I'm gonna say it again, but I don't use the water park. I don't, you know,
Right.
there's people that don't use those other amenities, but that's what makes Manchester a round community. We have sidewalks for biking, you know, that you partially paid for, right? And we appreciate that. But, you know, just the day that we were out there Wednesday doing our inspections of the hangars, we had 3 aircraft that day, one from Florida, one from Michigan,
So.
and another one that came from the Carolinas. And so you guys saw firsthand that that does happen. It, you know, some are here for personal reasons.
Doing it for personal.
Sure, absolutely. But like he said, it's an off-ramp for our community, and some people have to come different ways.
So these people come in town and spend any money in Manchester?
I know.
I'm sure they
They're
did.
Business people, they're probably looking to
One-
expand their business. We
I
don't
mean,
know.
I
One
definitely
know
can
for
tell you,
sure.
I have.
You can't.
And, you know, my businesses have spent money on concrete and sidewalks and signage and we invest every year and we pay property taxes as well. And so all I really wanted to implore with you guys is that the businesses, you know, the farmers generate sales of trucks and groceries and their kids come to school here. That airport affects more than just the 10 people. It really does affect the greater community, the farmers, and, you know, to not have it supported. Not saying get rid of it or whatever, but to not have it supported does have an impact on that. You know, we genuinely wanted to address your concerns about, is the federal funding at risk? And, you know, what that looks like from a closure perspective and from a regulatory perspective, what it takes to operate that. We really felt that this was a very substantial adjustment in terms of what we're asking, and I think it's a tremendous opportunity.
I think I have an idea, excuse me, Pat, of what you can tell people. The simple fact is, prior city councils in this town have entered into contractual binding agreements with the federal government. And we just learned now that those come with stipulations. We can't just walk away. We can't just sell the thing. We have to maintain it. What is the best option going forward? It's a major economic engine. If you believe that or not, that can be argued. I get that. I know what you're saying, and I can imagine the people that are saying it. But there are things, when you run a community, you have to make decisions. We don't have a lot of choices here. We have to maintain this thing. What's the least cost, most efficient way to do that? And I think we've got a gift right in front of us to spend roughly, I'm assuming around $60,000. Carve off a couple inches and get that thing resurfaced and be done with it. And we won't have to be doing this anymore. You can go on with the business of running the city and trying to
And
cut
then
taxes.
after that, then it's simple tanks and it's a
After what?
taxiway.
I'm sorry, after what?
After the runway,
After
there's always, I get
Well,
what
let me
you're
ask
saying,
you,
but
No, let's go there. After that is back to the annual budget, which is around 30,000 to keep everything maintained, the fuel system.
I
and
make
all
that
that.
mistake.
And that represents about 1/3 of 1% of everyone's property tax bill. I don't think people understand that is a drop in the bucket. I'm not trying to belittle the fact everything is a reduction, but are you willing to give that up? Are you willing to say, oh, I'm gonna take $5 off of your let's say you pay $2,000 for, property taxes, we're gonna lower that by $10, and we're gonna lose one of the major economic drivers of our community.
Well, let me ask
I don't
you
think
a
it's a good
simple
return.
question back then. Would you be willing to, foot $8,500 for, to be able per based aircraft out there?
Would I be willing to personally do what?
Offer, I don't care if you call it a runway tax, whatever, but, basically, in order for you to utilize the airport.
Is that-
$8,500.
I don't think.
Tom, is that allowed?
So if you had 10 aircraft, you.
Is that allowed? Tom?
I would actually have to look into it. I don't think in that manner. I've never heard of it quite that way. Let's just say it that way. And there's a lot of different things that get proposed out there. I won't say it's impossible. We can certainly look into it and help you figure it out.
I mean, other.
I wouldn't expect it because it hasn't been done before, so.
I don't think it'll get approval. I've never heard of it.
So
I understand what you're saying.
Well, I just go back to, skin in the game. I'm having to pay $10,000 to redo my driveways. Why can't we have you?
Well, you know, there's a way to do that, Brian, if you really want to do that. We could have toll roads on every street in Manchester.
Well, and I do want to say one other thing too. When we built our hangars, yeah, 40 foot of that you walked on out there, we did pay for that. That's just something we paid.
We've already put skin in the game.
Yeah.
It's our money.
Half of that parking lot that you
Our
walked
private.
on was paid for. by-
So-
And we pay lease to the city every year. We pay taxes to the county.
What do you pay for taxes on your hangar?
I don't know. You can probably look it up. I haven't looked lately. Why does that matter?
I can tell you.
Well,
depending-
you're saying for your
I
property.
own
tax, I don't
a
know.
40 by 40.
Yeah, depending on the rollback, which changed recently, mine was $1,000 a year at one time. I think now it might be 600 or 700. So,
It's
and,
not a big footprint, so.
you know,
And
of
then
course,
what's the
we have to
county,
provide
right?
insurance.
If
that-
county
school,
tax,
yeah.
county to school.
But not in the city, because we're not in city limits.
Right. Well,
So there's some stuff that, so the runway project, just set that aside, I think that us going back to the normal budget that we have 30,000 is a mistake. And the reason I say that is I've talked to some of these people that have sent emails. And Matt, I talked to him briefly when he stopped in, was that Wednesday? He come up to see his mom, he's got an email in here, and he also puts it in his email about what they're charging for hangars. I think the reason why we're having such a hard time getting support in the community inside Manchester, the ones that are paying the bill, is because the airport's not making money because you're not charging enough for stuff. I'm sorry, but that's just,
Yeah,
we compare it to other places, and I understand Matt's coming from a different
well,
area.
it's a different economic situation, but the point I want to make sure I draw your attention to. Matt's using a publicly funded hangar. It's a hangar that city paid for.
Right,
And so they can charge that. You can charge that. Build the hangar and let's charge that. But we,
what do you pay, what's your hangar lease a year?
my hangar was leased for 40 years. In 2005, before we were Nippius, and it was the first new hangar in 40 years on the airfield, so it was 300 a year. But it was an incentive, just like we do
Right.
for other developers or people that they want to invest.
I gathered
And
that.
it's aggressive.
And
I'm
I'm-
not gonna take that away from you. But
Wow, and you gotta
we've
lease a
grown the
lifetime.
airport too.
You got a lease of a lifetime and nobody can deny that.
right.
But when you look at other places, and I'm not saying we have to charge the same things they charge down south, but if he's getting $300, paying $300 to $500 a month. I'm not saying we're going to that,
Around here.
I'm not saying, we're
Well,
well,
where there's no services, no mechanics, no flight
I
training.
understand that, and that, I was getting to that.
Yeah.
I'm getting to that.
Okay, let him finish, let him
Yeah.
finish.
So I'm not saying that we go to the 300 to 500 a month. I'm not saying we're gonna change anybody's leases. I've already discussed it to him that I found it what I believe to be a small issue with one of the leases we have. That I would like to see amended.
But I think I have, it's not quite inaccurate. We have an agreement in place. We'll talk to you.
Right, but it doesn't look right.
Yeah.
And I wanna eliminate that stuff that doesn't look right, cause there's too many questions, we're getting documents that are getting handed to us that, like I've talked to you about, Pat, that we can't trust because this is what the airport usage is, and we've all discussed and realized that that was slightly misleading and how it gets to that point. But what I'm saying is like, if we go in and we start looking how we run the airport and run it more to try and make some money to make up on that 30,000.
But I would say in any business, yours, mine, Linda's, we have to invest, right, to grow.
Right,
And so the airport is no different. It has to invest to grow. Now,
right.
the hangars in Monticello and Old Line and Independence that are publicly funded with city and 95 or 90-10 match. Those hangars, I would tell you, are probably renting around $120 to $150 a month, depending on the age and when they were constructed. So 5% or 10% of that investment in that hangar is what the city needs to recoup in that rental fee
Right.
and the land underneath of it, in
Right.
fairness. And so, you know, that's how they're measuring it. They're not trying to create it as a profit center, but
Right.
to your point, you know, they want to at least break even.
I would love to see us break even.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that that's impossible. A lot of the airports that we see, you know, Monticello and Independence, some of their revenues come from farmland rentals.
Yeah.
Where they've acquired land for expansion, and then they turn around. We have to have that land for clearance for takeoff and landing.
Right.
So the FAA wants you to acquire that land, you know, if you can, right? That's obviously an issue for us, but in that situation, the land is typically rented back to the farmer that it was purchased from, and it becomes a revenue stream that helps to make the airport break even. And
And
so
that's what I'm saying. I'm thinking that,
Okay.
I believe we're committed to that as a goal, and I think we can work to that as a goal, but we have to grow, and
Right.
that growth takes investment.
the only,
Sorry.
the only business that I can see that is in Manchester's city limits that directly is affected by this airport and makes profit is the business done with Innovative Ag. They make money. The spraying.
Spraying.
Nobody else that uses the airport in town can show or quantify amount of money, and I think that is a mistake.
I made my living with my airplane for 20 years.
I get that.
Okay.
But you weren't really you were an individual making.
Yes,
business
and I
trips.
didn't employ anybody here in
Right.
this community. However, I did bring the money from what I earned back to this community and
Built
like the
them up.
proverbial kid that had the lemonade stand, I
Right.
bought a building downtown and have invested in the community. So it does pay dividends to have those resources and I'm sure that we could probably, you know, find that those pay dividends for our businesses as well. You know, their suppliers come in, their engineering firms. We just had one the other day that was an automation company that was in town and, you know, they do come and go to support our businesses and it's intangible. It's very difficult.
Right, that's what I'm saying, like to be able to track,
Yeah.
there's not really anything
It
there.
is,
So like
it is.
what I,
And most communities don't, they don't have any way to track that, but they do. They spend money on things like airports and they don't break even because they know someday when a large employer comes to town, they're gonna look for infrastructure, roads, railroads, airports are one of the top things they look for. Talk to any economic development person. Whether it's Hy-Vee flying that was a 8-passenger jet that barely got off the runway. They came in and out of town because of the new store they put up. We don't see that stuff. Communities go out on a limb, knowing that this is one of those things, just like, I don't know why you don't want to talk about pool and library and parks. This is all city assets.
do you know how the
Why
library
does,
got
why
founded in the
does
city?
one asset have to be
Carnegie grant.
Right.
Pardon me, I didn't hear you, Joe.
Do you know how the library got founded in this town?
By the,
Carnegie, by one of the men that built America.
Yeah, yeah.
The
Right,
thing.
but that's what I'm saying, you
That's right.
can't compare A to B.
Yeah, the thing that's hard to quantify, you know, we talk about Dr. Hummel and Lextron Animal Health. You know, that was a big factor for his location in this position too. And while it's easy to point at that and say that, well, that's a reason why the airport is important. That business has operated in this town. It has employed people in this town for decades. And the qualitative and quantitative impact that that's had on this community's tax base, on its employment base, it's paying dividends every day. And so, you know, you can't ignore that. And those things do happen. And
I'm not saying ignore any of them.
Yeah.
I tabled it to discuss it, not to stop it.
fair questions, right?
So-
I'm not
And that's
discounting.
why we're here.
Right, and I mean, I think I share some of the same frustrations as some of the other council members that have false information pushed around or accusations made that aren't anywhere near being true. But when I look at this, it's, I mean, when you sit there and ask yourself, why'd you buy your plane? so you can go make money, right?
Because it allowed me to be more efficient in my
To
business.
make more money.
The same reason a contractor buys a backhoe
Right.
or a larger tractor, it's an efficiency tool.
Right.
And the airport is an efficiency tool for
I
this
just-
community.
I just believe in it's. I'm not putting any fingers on anybody, or putting no blame or nothing. I just think that it's been managed incorrectly. I think if you have something that comes in where we're not doing any flight schools, we don't let any of that stuff happen here. We don't have,
Okay, just-
Actually, it's that's, I don't wanna. We do allow it, we just don't have anybody that's actively doing it, we have had in the past.
and how many, we were talking about how many, you don't
We
have
would
any,
love to have
you
that.
don't have any written people that say that they'll come here. How long is the waiting list of base of plane here?
Well, it's not gonna happen with the current environment we have,
Right,
okay?
because we
There-
don't have-
I
know-
totally understand that, but
I
I'm
know
saying like,
people-
how long's your waiting list? Can we,
I know there are people that have interest in building here, I know them personally,
right,
and they have told me flat out, they have no interest in anything in this town until the council has a different attitude. Let me change gears real quick. Why is there such a focus on making the airport break even where there isn't the same focus on every other asset that the city owns? I'm still trying to understand your motive,
Because not many people use it. That's the
because not many people use
Yeah.
the airport,
airport.
in your opinion.
Well, I think a lot of people tell the same thing, not just,
Okay, Tom, could we get you to weigh in on this? Do other communities make an emphasis on the airport needing to break even because it's not widely used? You run into that in other communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this conversation of any airport of this size, the vast majority of so there's over 5,000 public use airports across the country. So only about 400 of those are what you think of airline or bigger airports. So the vast majority are in similar situations, and almost none of them break even, honestly, unless they can get an industrial base on the airport. They're all being subsidized to some level within the community for all the same reasons you guys are discussing. It's an important piece of the community, and they value it. And so it's a part of the getting to the transportation infrastructure, and it's kind of a cost of doing business as a community.
Okay, so hardly any airports do break even, so I don't know if that's even possible. The issue at hand is still on the table. What are we gonna do? What options do we have going forward?
I'm still on the fact that if I spend $10, I can get $95 in return, or $5, I get $95 in return. That's a 9.5 to 1 return. I mean, it's a significant return.
the deal is amazing. I don't think anybody on the council would.
We're not calling that a profit, we're not calling that a profit to the city, but it is an income that the city is receiving to fund your growth.
I
And
realize that, and it's,
I kill for that in my business. I mean, where every one of us would.
every
right?
one of us would, and you go into someplace and you're gonna get a heck of a deal when you're buying something and you catch a sale and great, but it's still money out of your pocket.
It's an investment.
It's an investment.
And I'm just saying that if we're gonna make this investment, I would like to see us make investments that are going to make this investment worth the investment.
Make it, I'm sorry. I don't
Make it worth
understand.
it. So
How does that play?
are we, what do you guys have for future ideas on growth?
Still,
We'll say.
instrumentation.
Yeah,
growth.
one thing that wasn't said tonight that I want to kind of put back on the table. So as a part of the NIPIAS program, Tom talked about the fact that we were funded by aviation taxes, aviation sources of revenue. In the NIPIAS program, we receive an annual allocation of
About 150.
about 150,000. I mean,
And the city still pays 30 on top of that, make it.
Yes.
The allocation is directed towards federally approved.
things we can use it for, so I want to do that in the
He
vein
has a
of.
question. He has a question.
Okay,
according to my research on the NIPIA funds, if you have under 10 planes, you are an unclassified airport. Okay. How can we still get NIPIAS money if we are considered an unclassified airport?
I'll address that.
But let Tom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tom?
Yeah, it's something that needs to be addressed. The goal absolutely needs to be to get above 10 airplanes. And so that's why this discussion about some further development and hangars and kind of stabilizing the narrative that's going on there so that people will invest in hangars and bring those aircraft to where I think that question for your airport, since you are literally on the cusp, it looks like you're bouncing around 9 and 10 airplanes.
8, I think we're at 8.
8 at the moment. But you're right there at the edge. You're not in a danger zone per se, but it's something that needs to be addressed. And if the FAA sees that the community is ready to invest and do some of these things and continue, they'll absolutely work with you. Like I said, there's not a hard line at the 10 number. If you continue to drop and it's not supported, then absolutely the FAA may consider dropping future funding. But I think you guys are on the right track with a lot of the positive conversation that's being had here.
Linda, the thing that we talked to different, Tim McClung from the Iowa DOT, and I talked to Amy Walters from FAA. That is a guideline, and it's a fair question. We have a waiting list of people that want to be here. I mean, that we can have 10. We just, as you know, we had a couple plane hangars that were taken down, and they were on the ALP to be taken down anyway. So truthfully, it was an opportunity for us. I don't want to characterize it any other way, but the $150,000 a year allotment that comes into the NIPIS program can be earmarked for hangar development. We have the land, we have the people that want to do it. We just have to rebuild the confidence and the willpower in our community to see the value in that. And that can be a situation where we're looking at lease rates and rental rates and stuff, you know. What Matt presented to you is fair. And if you go to Florida or other places where there's a high demand for aircraft, some of those airports have a 10-year wait list.
Right.
We have a wait list, but it's different here. It's, you know, it's a smaller community and it's not. But I will tell you, if you go out on the FAA database and you look under Delaware County, Iowa, the number of based aircraft that are registered in this county, it's well above 10. They're just somewhere else. Yeah, they're somewhere else, and it's because they have to be somewhere else. And that's been our issue for a long time.
I tracked down some of them, Independence, Monticello, where some of them guys are based right now.
And they may want to be there, in all fairness, but
A couple of them told me they would like to be here,
yeah.
but you don't have the space one.
Well, and we also don't have an instrument approach, which is a big factor.
Yeah.
Most people that when they fly, we need to go. And I had that issue. I used to be able to fly out of Monticello or Independence because they had that capability. And when you come to a community that doesn't have an instrument approach, you have to make a go, no-go decision. So, you know, in my case, if I was going to Chicago for a 7 a.m. meeting, I'd be up at midnight to drive in there because I had to be there. But 10 years ago, to have an instrument approach was $1 million investment in electronics. And today that's not the case. And I want to make sure that everybody knows that today we use GPS coordinates. It's a software driven approach where it's virtual and it doesn't require any electronics, any towers, anything out there other than just a record in a database that we upload in our aircraft. And so again, we can have that now. We just needed to have a better supported runway, be part of NIPIS. And we've already teed up the ability to go work that instrument approach. It's about a 2-year process, but we're there. And we get that approach. It's virtually a free investment for us. You're gonna see those people that are in those other airfields that wanna be here, they're gonna come here. You know, it's if you build it, they will come situation.
To answer Linda's question, to put a finer point on it, if we show support for the airport, if we get above that 10, if the DOT and the FAA want us to show, they want us to build up the hangar and get above 10, the more airplanes, the more federal money. It's kind of a snowball effect.
Yeah.
And we can make that happen. We can get the instrument approach. If we show that level of commitment, we will have activity. As far as the airport breaking even, I don't know what to tell you guys. It's just not gonna happen. There's no,
More efficiency would be
Yes,
appreciated.
we-
is what we're saying.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. I realize that they're not gonna break even, but you close the gap. What can we do to close the gap?
Yeah. You know, I know people firsthand who would love to come here and do that. It requires a change of the environment.
Confidence.
And it would require someone to be based here and have maintenance, flight training, charter work. If that was the case, and we had a good fuel system, there's gonna be a bit of a time until that gets to that point, but this individual I was talking to claims they could make this airport fairly break even with fuel sales if we can get more aircraft on the field. And currently, that's not gonna happen. Until if we show a
Our biggest
commitment,
restriction right now with the hangars, up until we started buying more land a couple of years ago, we didn't have a place to put them.
yeah,
We are
Right.
literally crawling to get to that point where we start walking.
It's taken 17 years of us
Yeah.
working on this, and
Right.
again, 17 years ago, 2005, it's 19 years now, I guess. We saw that process, we kind of set a goal. We talked about it, it's a 20-year plan that it takes to get there, and we're there, we're in NIPIAS, we are 95% funded now for infrastructure, and you know, it's hard to get into that program. Manchester should be very proud of the fact that they made it into that program, because it's not easy. And Linda, to your question about the 10 based aircraft, they vetted us hard on that issue, and that was not easy. But they do understand that process, you know, we have an airplane that was damaged in an incident, that happens. And so that's your 10. And if it wasn't for that, it would still be here. He wishes it was still here. But you know, they know that those things kind of come and go, and so it's not a controversy, it's just a process. that-
To address that, I had an email, that I obtained that basically in, November 14th of 23 is basically FAA saying that, we verified that you're down to 6 planes and we're hoping you can get back up to that 10 category. And, but yeah, when I see and that would have been from the NIPIAS.
This is from based aircraft.
This is based aircraft, but that was.
Did you share that with everybody?
Relating to,
Did you share that with everybody?
no.
Did you say?
Well,
did you
please
say-
get a copy of that for everybody, please.
Yeah, I just want to ask a question. Is it an email that you're talking about?
It's an email.
Who was it from?
Jeff Dietering,
Who?
Jeff Dietering, with the FAA.
Okay.
And it was basically laying out that we're down to 6 aircraft. Or you guys are down to 6 aircraft and that you need to get back. That was in November of 23. So here's my.
You don't know how that's
That's
possible,
not-
because as you know, we had Mr. Woodley's aircraft here already at that time. His facility was
So they
constructed.
were
May have
planning on
changed
placed
some
on
time.
So, and that could be, it could have been a bookkeeping issue. I will tell you that
Dates they were added.
the process going into, we have an annual registration form that we have to fill out for the state of Iowa. And then there's a recurring one. I don't know what the interval is now for the federal. But the only time that database gets updated is if somebody buys a plane and registers, or sells a plane or moves a plane. And, so the database on that is, it's not heavily perfect. But, you know, the walkthrough that you guys did the other day.
That day.
Yeah, and my point is, what you guys did on Wednesday, the walkthrough, that's the best way to measure it. Because those aircraft that you saw, they're based here, they're in the hangars, not Matt's, you know, he was a transient that day, but
No.
that, you know, if you guys have concerns about that
That
from a
was-
confidence perspective.
That was my main concern was the NIPIAS, was there any, lack of better words, any.
Funny business?
Number, any funny business as far as things,
No,
because that's something I don't want anymore.
yeah, no, I mean, trust me, the FAA,
Yeah, the feds are not gonna let us get away with that.
Well, and that's why when I
And
seen
it's
this,
all-
email from, from the FAA saying down to 6 planes, that was in 2023.
We'll be on that.
I mean, the good news is, to address that is, you know, Craig has made a significant, thank you, a significant investment in his maintenance facility. He has, I mean, he had 7 aircraft here the other day, but he has In my conversation, Craig Woodley,
Woodley.
he has told me 5 is what he has based here.
Yeah,
If we wanted,
according to what I was.
yeah, and then again, it's because he's buying and selling. They actually had one that was damaged last year, and so that's why I think that one fell off the registry.
Because the one he had in there, the 3, wasn't a base aircraft
Yeah.
here. So
And-
when I physically looked, we had 6 aircraft,
Yeah,
and 2 of them,
Yeah.
Woodley's were not on site.
and I mean, it's back to, they're super fluid. They're moving around between Iowa and Illinois and Wisconsin on a regular basis, but I think that we can do hangar inspections to make sure we maintain that, but the process there is that the FAA does know that number does fluctuate from time to time. The good news is we're very, very close, if not at it. And we've got a list of people that want to be here. So once we get into that 12, 13, 14 range, it's not gonna be an issue anymore.
We're just about there. And it's pushing 6:30. Let's try to wrap this up for Tom's sake. We're at a crossroads. We're at a crossroads right now, I believe, and we have an opportunity to show the public that we are willing to move forward. We know that we are legally bound to support this asset of the city. Can we do it more efficiently? I'm all ears. I would love to look into options, but we have an opportunity to go ahead with the request for the funding. We're not committing to it. That would be a step in the right direction. And in addition to that, we could get the word out that we're open for business. We want more hangar development. We get more planes, we get more fuel sales. We bring up that flow of revenue
We work towards that goal.
and move as close as we can toward being more efficient. I'm all for that.
And I would also like to add that we want, we have support in the airport board. We have support from part of the council. I've asked Connie to invite some non-supporting members or people that have doubts or concerns to be on our board. Because we want that transparency with you. We want you to trust us. We want you to see the daily work that we do. Our heart is in the right place. We want this community to grow. We want to invest. And we want you to feel good about what's happening out there. And the only way I think that's possible is if you're involved. I think it's hard for you to justify,
Well,
Brian, to the
I think
people that
that's-
call you.
I think
you're not
as
seeing
a
it.
voting person, that would be a conflict of interest.
Well, we're not asking you to support it. I want to be clear.
voting for money towards the airport.
No, okay, well, I have council members who sit on these committees.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
What
You are the liaison
I'm-
between the council and them. That's what it is.
from,
You don't vote.
from my perspective, Brian, I see that as a benefit because you can be the watchdog. You can be the person
Well,
that doesn't
the same
agree
thing with
and can be right in the middle of that, looking and doing the due diligence on that, holding us accountable. We want that.
And along those lines, we are an advisory board. We don't have any power.
Right.
We know quite a bit and we are able to tap into people like Tom at the AOPA and the FAA. We're mandated to pay attention to that stuff. If you want to be involved in that with us, we would love that.
We want that, yes.
And many times the council serves as ad hoc members on these committees or commissions, which means you wouldn't have a vote, but you are there acting as a liaison between the committee or commission.
But when it comes
and the
to here,
council.
they do have a vote,
When
right?
they come to
Yeah.
council, they have.
And that was the part I was getting
Yeah.
at. To me, that seems like a conflict of interest.
I truly believe that is
Because if
the
you
opposite of
influence
that.
how things are going and.
If we can't convince you as a participant in that process that what we're doing is worthwhile, then so be it. But we don't wanna, back to Connie's original point about the vision of the community, right? When people don't cross, or they're not, maybe they don't understand I don't understand your viewpoint or Linda's, or you don't understand ours, that's where that division occurs. We want the community to have time to see that value, and we want you guys part of that process so that, we can have a positive influence on you and maybe hope that you'll support us. But you don't have to.
And this was a great meeting. There was a ton of information shared. And I think I can honestly go out now and talk to the people that watch this. And hopefully we're gonna get a ton of people that watch this. So that I can get out there and communicate with the people. In my business, I talk to everybody.
Yeah, and
And
you could just as easily, if you come around and see merit to what's happening here, you could be a supporter of it. So that's our challenge, right? Is to work to help convert you. But I know that you guys have to believe in it and trust it. And if you're not in the middle of it, I don't know how we fix that.
I feel like a good meeting, I agree. I feel like for the first time, I've been trying to understand the motive of your resistance to the airport, and now I get it. I really think this has been a good meeting, and I would hope you guys can feel the same way that you can then go out and communicate. You know, hey, it's a federal commitment. We can't just walk away. What we can do though is work with these people and try to become much more efficient by promoting, by bringing more aircraft in the field, by increasing fuel sales and lease rents and all that
To
stuff.
break even.
We've already purchased a lot of the land. We just need to build on it.
Right.
So I think we're right there on the cusp of making this thing look a lot better on paper.
Well, and I'll be honest, I feel that I get a bad rap because, you know, I'm always saying no, but you know what? It's easy to say yes. It's hard to ask questions.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing of it is, I don't, you know, I've made a lot of yes decisions. We've spent money on getting stuff done in this community. Yes, I've been opposed to Grand Avenue. I've been opposed to East Street. And it all comes down to dollars. You know, people are hurting right now. Times are tough.
Yeah.
You know, so every dollar that we can shave off is a plus for the community.
And we need to, you know,
And it's a
communicate
balancing act.
the
Yeah.
cost benefit of, you can shave off $5 here, but we're gonna lose what could be our next big employer in town. That may not be a good.
You know, one thing I can see from this is, you know, we've got to, where do we put our value? Do we put our value in safety? You know, if what happens if, you know, we don't do anything with the airport, something happens and we have a plane land there and crashes because we failed to fix the runway. Where do we go from there?
Well, you know, we are constantly trying to have our finger on the pulse on that issue, because again, that's our job, is to make sure that we're communicating with Jason and Tim if we have a concern. We're not to that point yet, but we do feel that we have, you know, we have things that we need to address, and that's where the whole crack seal versus overlay came into it. And, you know, I don't remember who it was that said it, but you guys need to see the numbers, you need to see the cost benefit. And when you look at a $63,000 3-year crack seal versus an maybe $80,000 cost for a 20-year redo with tile and painting, I feel that's a powerful cost benefit. And when you have a 95.5, it makes it even better. So
And it's a move in the right direction to say, okay, we know we have to do something. This is the most efficient use of taxpayer resources. We're done with it for a decade or two. Now let's move on and
let's
see
focus
where.
on getting profitable.
Yeah.
What's the capacity that we got out there now? Not cramming them in there like sardines, but what can you hold for aircraft?
20.
You could probably hold 20 what we
Now,
have.
Are you talking about
We
land?
already had
No,
plans
just-
for the.
just the hangars we have now.
The city built, if the T hangars went in, publicly built, we could still do 95.5. That would be another 8 to 10, couple rows of that.
You have room for 20 or we have 20 available?
Room.
Well, there's room for
Room
another.
I'm saying, what's standing right now, brick and mortar right now?
Yeah.
How many can we house out there right now?
Based on current land.
No,
No,
current
no.
hangars.
Current
Hangars.
hangars.
I wanna address that. I think what you're talking about is, you know, in terms of footprint of buildings and the challenge we have. I mean, I'll just use mine as example. I at one time had 2 aircraft in mine. And there have been times when I've had 6 in mine during an air show we did in 2007. But the problem is, they're like Jenga, right? They're
Right.
and so in our particular situation, my insurance agent, I can't rent my hangar out to other people or it doubles my insurance cost. The other thing that we have a challenge with is that, you know, like it's something that's important to you, we don't always want other people moving our things around, you know, if I gotta go at 5 in to fly, I don't wanna have to spend an hour doing inspection because somebody's been moving it. My case, I have a hangar that's too big for what I need, but it was built at the time for what I needed, and
Right.
today I fly, a different airplane that's smaller. I mean, I could sell my hangar if somebody wanted to buy it and put 3 planes in it, and build a smaller one. I'm not opposed to that. So but there really isn't a mechanism for me to put 3 people in there, the way it's structured today.
But I mean, the way
But I'm
we sit
willing
right
to
now,
talk about
We're
that.
full.
you guys are full
There's no, yeah.
and
I'm
with
one
9,
for-
Yeah. Well,
or you're full with 10.
No, the hangar between us has 3 airplanes that could maybe squeeze one more.
yeah,
So that'd
and
be-
thankfully he's willing to rent. I mean, we're
But I
happy that he
guess
does that.
where I'm trying to go here is if our capacity right now, what we have standing right now is 10.
But we do have people that I wanna, we do
They
have
wanna
people that
come.
are willing to build a privately funded hangar. That's our challenge, right? Is can we do a publicly funded hangar with our 150 a year? At some point, but we kinda gotta get that engine going and do some
Right.
private hangar development, so we've got people that wanna be here, and Jim and I have talked about, well, can we build another hangar and lease it out?
I've had 2 people who contacted.
Yeah, I mean, we're all talking about that, and the problem is it's not a profit-making thing. I mean, we're in the business of renting storage, right? And I know how that business well. It's not a profitable.
It's a
venture.
chicken and the egg as well. You upgrade the runway. We tried to go for the whole enchilada and do the expansion. That didn't go. But you have to have a runway that's in decent shape, and you have to have people that want to build hangars.
Honestly.
They have to have confidence, right?
Have to
that
do
we're
it,
not
obviously.
If we can get support, if we can show support that we're gonna be around for a while, get the runway done. It's in pretty tough shape. Get that shored up, and then the land is already there. We've already purchased it. Then use the 150 a year to build these T hangars. We can pack that place. We can sell a lot of fuel.
I mean,
Where I'm going with this is if our capacity is at 10, and we're talking about this, which the engineers always shoot high
Yeah.
with the $1.2 million project. At some point in time, the board is gonna come back to the council and request potentially building hangars, potentially.
We're getting 150 a year.
yeah, we.
I understand that.
I weigh in on that. I want to put a caveat on that. The NPE money, the 150,000 a year, does have limitations on how that can be used, and it depends on what else the airport may need done. If there are safety issues that need to be addressed and that sort of, those are first priority for the federal funds before you can even begin to talk about vertical infrastructure with those funds. That being said,
So
you guys are very
130,000
fortunate though that the Iowa DOT does have a hangar financing program, and some money is available there, which vast majority of states do not have. So let's look into that with Tim McClung and get some more information on that. I don't know the details of it.
Okay.
I think, one of the things we could do as an airport is we could go get written commitments from people that want to be here. I mean, we can do that. Tim knows, we've been advocates for hangar development for 10 years. But the challenge is they want to know that we're working towards a better airport, an instrument approach. And so having confidence that you as a council are firm in your conviction to support it it's gotta come first. And you guys give us that, we'll drive as hard as we can to get you to grow.
And we're being in storage units, we know, that you go and you build, and
They
you're
come.
figuring that you're gonna fill them up. You don't build them to not,
No,
you're not buying pump trucks to
I
not,
agree.
you're making that investment, you're taking a gamble. So
There is a risk,
Right.
but we are working every day to mitigate that risk, to
Right.
build this, and we want Manchester to continue to grow. We want to see
I think
the
we all-
housing continue to grow and the business
Business.
continue to grow. The more that
We all want
happens.
that. We all want that.
Yeah.
We're all striving for that. And I ran for council and came on here because I wanted to make sure that the city grows, but in the right direction and not overspend and everything. I mean, that's my main
Yeah, I'm
goal.
with you.
And,
We all
you know,
are.
we all are. We all work that way.
And I believe that the best thing we can offer you is, to have more confidence about that is involvement in everything we do. And, I welcome that.
I also think the perception is important in the community. Brian kept talking about perception. I think it would be really good if we as a council could show some perspective to everyone that we are on the same page instead of a big fight about everything, you know what I mean? I just think that we need to show the community that we are behind the airport, that we want to support the airport, that we feel that this grant would be a good thing to do. I think that the more we can work together as a group, it will show the community then.
I think this has been a great meeting to get
I do
this,
too.
the other meetings where it's just you and we give our 5 minutes and it's, I wish we could do more of these. I think this has been very
Well,
productive.
maybe
Yeah.
that's something we should do as we move forward over
Right.
the next year,
Yeah.
over the next 12
Well,
months.
and the biggest thing is I want to be able to get it out to the public.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
has,
Put on record.
has put it on record. That I never did say I wanted to close it, you know, so the stigma of, you know, we're closed for business never came from my mouth.
Mhm.
And so, you know, that's why I said this is really productive meeting. You know, there's a lot of stuff hashed out and, you know, a lot of stuff to think about. I mean, very productive, I think.
No,
And having Tom.
And-
One of the better ones.
And if I wasn't willing to even listen to the whole idea of what we're able to do and all that other stuff, I would have voted no
Yeah.
instead of asking to table it.
Yeah.
So-
respect that.
You know, it's just, I go back to the Grand Ave thing. I voted no right off the bat and found out that there was a lot of stuff that I did not see and did not ask the right questions and was not told. There's a lot of stuff that you guys know that you have not told
Yes,
us.
it's complicated.
And that's the thing is
Do we need Tom anymore? So
We
he
need
can
to
go?
let Tom go.
We need to let Tom go.
Thank you,
Yes.
thank you.
And Tom, if you wanna stop sharing your screen, that would be helpful.
That I can do.
Thank you, Tom.
No, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and good constructive meeting. I'm impressed. You guys are doing fine.
Thanks, Donald.
Thanks so much.
But you know, like when we talk about stuff bad, like the other day and stuff, when you share your airport knowledge with me, or even when we went up in the plane that time. If you tried to teach me everything you know, you're only gonna remember to teach me 80% of it.
Well, and you can tell it's a passion thing, right?
Right.
It's sometimes it's difficult for us to understand maybe why other people don't see what we see, but that's why I feel it's important for you to have the opportunity to participate with this, because we want to share that with you and we want you to have that same passion and to see the potential of what that can be.
If you guys notice in your packet, part of it includes this little printout. This is AOPA's basic summary. The actual FAA documents are 600 pages. This is a very well done piece for city councils to say, what does it mean to enter into an agreement? So this is really good. When I first got on the airport board, a lot of this stuff was Greek to me. It's eventually soaked in, but it's tough, it's complicated. So we need these meetings to talk it out and say, what does that mean? You're talking lingo that I don't know what that means. This does a good job of explaining, you know, we're all in this, we've got to keep this thing going. What do we do going forward? I would sure hope that in the near future, we could get, there is a time deadline on this request for proposal, request for,
Just the applications for the capital
Yeah.
improvement plan.
yeah. That would be
It's
my
an
last push.
application, it's not actually accepting
Yeah,
any.
but I do want to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity tonight
It's
to,
been good.
and it was good for me and all of us to
We did
hear
this.
and, you know, to try to get on the same page.
Good to be informed.
Yeah, and thank you for the question.
Yeah,
And really, I think we finally, I feel like I heard you guys tonight. So,
Okay,
thank you.
everybody,
So we don't have to, or do we have to vote?
I'm going to request that you do vote on July 20, Second meeting.
Is our next meeting.
authorizing me to submit it.
Right.
And again, this is not a final vote approving it. This is just saying I'm allowed to submit it to the FAA
Right,
to see
for
if.
consideration. Because there's still not a guarantee.
right.
I don't know if we missed the deadline or not. There's not a guarantee. Let's get it in.
We had that discussion on Monday.
Yeah.
So for some of the airport board members that did not know, I had actually talked to Tim about submitting the request. Because I realized that if you do not submit the request, you can't get that ball rolling. And we don't want to close the door that doesn't need to be closed yet. So,
I think it's our best option by far with that 95. That's like half price.
right.
to make this thing and be done with it. And just not have to be
Is there,
slopping the seal on it every 3 years.
is the window between now and the 24th a danger for the bill grant? Is that, I mean, I know we can't have a vote because it wasn't on the agenda, but as if there's.
I
a
can't
consensus.
answer that. I just don't.
Okay, okay.
All I can do is we can submit it, see what funding is available for us.
Honestly.
And I wanted everybody to have an opportunity to digest everything that they.
Go home and
heard
sleep
tonight,
on it,
so you can sleep on it.
Yeah.
And if you have other questions, please reach out to each other
Write them down.
and for us as well, you know,
Well,
it's us talking to each other, that's helpful, okay?
and it'll also be nice with the public, if we can get the public engaged and watching this video.
Right.
So that they're fully.
Oh, they're gonna be watching.
aware. And then I can go out there and start asking questions back at them, you know, what do you guys think
Yeah,
now
you-
that you know the majority of the information?
And Connie, thank you for your opening remarks. I think that was extremely well done.
Well, we're all,
When was the last time we had an air show out there?
2007.
When was the big helicopter out there?
that was
We
Rumpy
did that
Bill.
in
2019
and
Yeah.
2021.
500 people, 500 veterans that were given an airlift in a Huey helicopter.
Yep.
That was the coolest day.
That's fun, yeah.
Actually,
It was a whole weekend. Were you on that?
Yeah.
That was powerful stuff.
It's all Rumpy Bill's doing.
They wanna come again. We just, you know, for us, we have to sponsor. We passed the hat to sponsor about $3,000 worth of fuel to get them here. And then we hope that we have enough turnout to make it worthwhile. So the fire convention was a perfect event for that. And Grumpy's dedication was a
The
second.
wall on the.
Both of those were record breakers for them. That was the most rides that they have ever done twice in their history.
Yeah.
And they do wanna come back, but we just have to find the right circumstance.
And hopefully have some other events out there that can showcase the airport, some more people can get out there and understand it.
Do they make money on them? Like, does the airport bring in any revenue when they did that?
Not really. I think it's more just good community will. I mean, you know, they're connecting the veterans, that some of those guys that took the rides out, the last time they were on a Huey was being flown out of Vietnam, and
There's a chance if we were in the future able to have jet fuel, Jet A, we could sell to the aircraft, or the ag applicators, as well as situations like this. So we currently don't have Jet A, but with that,
Yeah, well,
we're
I'm
working.
hesitant on having that part, just.
There's
Another discussion.
with that.
I mean, our biggest thing is that we just wanna make sure there's enough
No, it's
people
okay.
show up to ride,
Right.
that they have a positive event, and that it's a positive showing for Manchester. So we're committed to do more of that stuff, and, you know, as we talked about, we've done Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts and STEM events for the kids and stuff.
Yeah.
We'll do whatever you guys want us to.
Might not be a bad location for car shows.
Yeah.
Well, until we pave the road out there, because a lot of people will take their field cars down that road.
What, the 16th of a mile, you gotta get to the driveway.
Yeah.
The flowage fee is good with Craig too. I mean,
Yeah.
we're getting a flowage fee off
Yeah.
of everything that he, so that's
Yeah.
without even having to have. For now.
Right.
So, again, thank you.
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Great.
With that, I'm taking a motion from Brian, a second from Bill, that we are adjourned, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.